Chapter 16. Joan looked at Veronica again, only to find her completely checked out, her eyes closed, hand folded on her heart. Great, what a fabulous time for a meditation break. She turned her focus back to Wendy, nervously watching the golden orb of light developing between her outstretched palms, the first active magic she'd seen since Mrs. Olson had cursed them. Maybe Brandon was right. This didn't look like garden variety Wicca. She bit her lip, thinking furiously. Should they continue their plan? It was Veronica's turn, though, and there was no way to get across the circle they'd been making to heave the shelf over herself. She silently jumped up and down a couple of times, waving to get Veronica's attention, but the other woman's eyes remained closed. Joan was on her own, for the moment anyway. She could push over a different rack and hope Veronica would get the message and keep going. It was tough to know what to do without knowing what that ball of magic was for, and without knowing what the hell Veronica was doing. She glanced at Wendy's hands again. The orb was growing tendrils, which were traveling in several directions, branching off from the main light. It had a creepy vibe, as though it was searching for something, or someone. Joan snuck a peek at Wendy's face, which was closed down, completely blank. Eyes closed, mouth slack, cheeks and brows relaxed, like the light was taking all of her consciousness. And the tendrils were starting to gather in the opposite direction from Joan. They were, in fact, creeping directly toward Veronica, who had moved into some kind of yoga warrior pose, her stance wide, her arms straight, palms facing outward toward Wendy. Making a snap decision, Joan moved toward the office, keeping her eyes on Wendy. This proved to be a mistake, as she immediately banged her shin on the fallen napkin rack. Joan clenched her fists, her face, and her feet all at once to keep from screaming and cursing. Why the shin? The only thing worse was stubbing your toe. She opened her eyes cautiously and saw with relief that Wendy didn't appear to have heard anything. She kept moving, making her way carefully around the prone shelving units. When she finally reached the office door, she risked another glance over her shoulder. A branch of energy was just a couple of inches from Veronica's palm. Joan hesitated. Maybe she should go back. She watched as the probe reached her friend's hand and was gently rebuffed. The energy simply drifted past, with no reaction from either Veronica or Wendy. Joan raised her eyebrows. Maybe Veronica really was a guru. She shrugged and turned to enter the office, and stubbed her toe on the doorframe. Her head snapped backward and her lips parted in a silent howl to the heavens. She grabbed the doorknob for support, hopping on one foot into the room. She stopped just short of the pentagram. Up close, she could see that it was formed from some kind of crumbled herb, something mystical, rare, and powerful, no doubt, grown in a sacred grove and harvested in the dark of the moon. Brandon was still seated in the center of it, his head hanging as though he was asleep, or unconscious, or dead. No, he couldn't be dead. She felt completely out of her element, with no idea whether this spell followed the parameters of witchcraft she thought she knew. Would it be safe to enter the pentagram? Pop culture was pretty mixed on that point, and that's really all she had to go on, besides cryptic references from dusty old tomes about time-based magic and inherited elemental powers. Tentatively, Joan poked a finger into the space above the line. Then a little bit past it. Nothing happened. She stepped inside and waited, breath bated, eyes scrunched closed. Nothing happened, and she opened one eye and then the other. The room seemed to be the same as it had been before. She circled around Brandon's chair until she was directly in front of him and then reached for his neck. She released a grateful sigh as she felt his pulse jump beneath her fingers, and she pulled him into her arms, fighting back tears. He was alive. Joan? Holy fuck, babe, I have never been so glad to see anyone in my whole fucking life. Brandon's whisper pulled her back to reality. We gotta get you out of here, she said. Veronica's handling Wendy, I guess. You guess? She shrugged. Our plan didn't go as planned. We were supposed to be trapping Wendy in a pyramid of fallen shelves, and then Sadie was going to call the cops, but... Joan stood up and circled back around to Brandon's hands to cut off his ties. Oh, crap. What? We were going to use Veronica's knife to get these ties off. Wait, Veronica carries a knife? I know, right? Surprised the crap out of me. One of those utility knives you clip to a belt. She keeps it in the inside pocket of her yoga pants. She has pockets in her yoga pants? It's a whole lifestyle thing. Fancy yoga pants with pockets. How the hell are we going to get these off? He nodded toward the purse at her hip. You got anything in your bag? She thrust her hand deep into the main compartment, rummaging blindly, shoving aside pens, wallet, loose change, keys. Her hand froze. Could it be? She gripped a small oblong object and pulled it out. It was! Her corkscrew! The good one with the foil cutter on the side. She took a moment to do a teeny-tiny happy dance in place before getting down to business. Joan knelt beside Brandon once more and unfolded the tiny blade on the side. She sawed at the zip ties, and little by little they came apart. Got it! She pulled the ties off of him, waving them triumphantly over her head. Brandon jumped to his feet, rubbing his wrists. Okay, let's get Veronica and get out of here. She folded up the corkscrew, stowing it back in her purse, and then stood and grabbed his hand. They crept to the door and peered out into the storeroom. Veronica was lit up like a Grateful Dead concert. Beams of mystical light surrounded her on all sides, but were completely ignoring her. Wendy remained motionless, eyes still closed, apparently trusting her spell to find anyone around. If she'd just opened her eyes, she definitely would have seen her prey immediately. Joan fought the urge to snicker. Instead, she led Brandon carefully around all of their obstacles, pointing silently to two of the shelves, miming to him the order in which to push them. Then she took up position beside Veronica to cover her half. She held up a finger, then two, then three, then pointed to Brandon. He pushed over a rack, and she immediately followed suit. He pushed his, and she pushed hers, and within a second, Wendy was surrounded by shelves. Wendy's eyes snapped open, and she emitted a rage-filled shriek, dropping her hands, her spell swiftly draining backward into her palms. Veronica dropped her warrior pose and opened her own eyes. Got him? Let's go. The three of them raced up the stairs, and Joan twisted the knob, heaving the door open and slamming it into the side of the stainless steel dishwasher next to it. They poured out into the bar to find several of the morning regulars staring at them. Sadie jumped to her feet and joined them in their speedy exodus out onto the sidewalk. As they'd planned, Sadie and Veronica raced to Joan's car. Joan dragged Brandon to his car, sliding into the passenger seat and putting on her seatbelt. Brandon revved the engine on and shifted into reverse. He turned his head, bracing his hand on the shoulder of Joan's seat, and took his foot off the brake. And then, for the third time in her life, Joan felt a jolt of electricity surge through her body. Everything went blurry. She lurched against the seatbelt as they smacked into the car behind them with a sickening crunch.